Do you see this color right here? You probably have a name for it swirling in your mind. Magenta, fuchsia, pink? It's not pink. But what if I told you that it's not real? And not in like a matrixy, nothing is real kind of way. Just straight up, flat out, this is not a real color that exists. Don't believe me? Well, this right here is the intersection of biology and physics. Come cross the road with me.
This is the electromagnetic spectrum, electromagnetic radiation's size range. EM waves all travel at the speed of light, but some of these waves are longer than others. On one end, we have low frequency radio waves and microwaves, while on the other end, we have high frequency X-rays and gamma rays. But somewhere in the middle, in this tiny sliver, is the visible spectrum, with wavelengths ranging from about 400 to 700 nanometers, almost 100 times thinner than a strand of hair. You'll notice that there's no magenta in this spectrum. That's because there's no wavelength of light that corresponds to magenta. It's a bit of a violet red, so you might expect it to be before red or after violet. But before red is invisible, it's heat, and after violet is the same. Ultraviolet radiation can't be seen. So how can we see magenta?
Well, for that, we can't just keep looking at the physics of light, because light is a physical phenomenon, but color is a biological one. Here's how.
These are your eyes. Behind them, there are two kinds of light receptors, cones and rods. Rods function best in lower light scenarios, and they're found at the outer edge of the retina, not in the centers. Cones in the center are responsible for detecting color. Different cones are sensitive to different spectra of light. About a third of your cones are more sensitive to the longer red wavelengths of light, a third of them the middle wavelength greens, and a third of them short wavelength blues. Cones get excited when they receive a wavelength that they like, notifying your brain. So when red light starts streaming in, the cones that like red light get excited. But the other two groups stay silent, so your brain knows that it's seeing red. And same goes for green and blue. But what about when, say, something in between red and green comes in? Something with a wavelength of 600 nanometers? Cones aren't only receptive to one wavelength. They have range. This graph shows about how much your cones respond to each wavelength. What we see happening is that both the red and green cones get excited. Your brain hears them both and makes the very intelligent induction that it's seeing something between red and green. Yellow. The same thing happens when the green and blue rods are stimulated. Your brain sees cyan. So what happens when both your red and blue cones are stimulated simultaneously? It believes that the color that you're seeing is a color that's between red and blue, the same way yellow is between red and green. However, it can't make a color with a wavelength that's actually between red and blue, because that would be green, and it knows that the green cones aren't being stimulated. Instead, it makes this new fake magenta colors that you perceive to be between red and blue.